Good evening and welcome back to Heart and Hand Extra, your second free show of the week. As always, I am your host, Adam Thornton. On tonight's show, we will look back on yet another outstanding result against Borussia Dortmund last night at Ibrox. Rangers drawing 2 each and therefore progressing to the next round of the Europa League 6-4 on aggregate, where we will play Crvena Zvezda or Red Star Belgrade in English money. Joining me tonight to look back on last night's unforgettable performance, we have David Edgar.
Hello everyone. Hello Adam. Nice to be here.
And we have Ross Hutton. Ross, hello.
Hi Adam, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. Obviously it was, as I've said twice now, unforgettable, tremendous. To me, the best European result that we've had in terms of a result that we can progress through a group with, or two-legged result, or whatever you want to call it. To me, that is the one for me. I started going in 94, so maybe just a wee bit too early for some of the bigger ones in the kind of early 90s, late 80s, but Parma, etc. onwards, to me, this eclipses it. David, we've spoke a lot over the last 24 hours on the Patreon show. We've given our thoughts, etc. on it. Do you want to recap it here for the flagship listeners? What was that for you last night?
I would agree with you in terms of a home performance straight away, because Parma, the second leg was away, of course, and there's been memorable Champions League and Europa League group nights, but in terms of a two-legged tie, knockout football, then this one, the only comparable one I have in my lifetime, is Dynamo Kiev in 87-88. And there were a lot of echoes of that last night against a top side who really would fancy their chances of actually winning the whole tournament. But there is a marked difference in the way that football has gone since then. And both for us and for clubs like Dynamo Kiev, of course, although they've got their bigger worries this week, as we all know. But back then, that Rangers side genuinely did have aspirations to win the European Cup, and it wasn't unrealistic. We would have needed a bit of luck along the way, but we had a team full of England internationals. We would be spending, as much, and if not more, than the vast majority of sides in Britain, with really only the top Italian clubs being able to outspend us. Football has evolved, and not always in a healthy way, and the top five leagues dominate. It's set up for them to dominate. You just need to look at the Champions League, where the top five leagues get 4 automatic places, thus ensuring that most of the money in European football continues to go to them, and that furthers that monopoly. It's the leagues with a big TV audience have all the advantage, and Germany, of course, is very much one of them. It's not built. This competition format is not built for the likes of us and clubs from leagues like us to go on and to progress. So, first of all, there's that. Secondly, there is just the fact that you look at the disparity in the amount of money that has been put down to build both of those sides. Jude Bellingham, who again I thought was absolutely fantastic, by far Dortmund's best player over the two legs. You wouldn't get any change out of 100 million if you went to buy him, and you'd probably need to come up with a bit more. That's a universe that we don't exist in. So you need to match that, because they have players all over the field who have that sort of, that transfer value. We need to match that with commitment, hard work, skill, organisation, tactical nous, discipline, all of those things. And we have to be brave, and we can't just sit in and defend, because these teams are too good. They'll eventually, over 2 games, they'll wear you down. And I think it said a lot last night, going into the game last night, Adam, that even at 1-0 down on the night and 5-2 down in the match, Dortmund didn't think they were out of it. Nobody thought they were out of it. They weren't out of it. And that is due to the fact that they come into a match like that with the confidence of saying, hang on, we are Borussia Dortmund. We're a huge club anyway, but we're the second best team in Germany. We don't go out of this competition at this stage to teams from Scotland. And it's mammoth. I know that in the initial minutes after it, we're all prone, me as much and if more so than most, to hyperbole. But it really isn't hyperbole saying that this is one of the greatest results ever in Rangers history and one of the greatest results ever in the history of Scottish football. Because, as I say, it's not merely knocking out an excellent team. It's not merely knocking out a team that, on paper, most certainly you shouldn't have been able to. It's fighting against the way that football's gone. And it's just absolutely tremendous. And if anyone out there is thinking that I'm going a bit too far, this result has caused shockwaves all over Europe. You just need to look at social media. You just need to look at the reaction to last week's result. Whenever there's a European competition, we all do it. We look at the results of matches that we maybe didn't watch, and we'll go, my God, look at this. Can you believe that Team X got knocked out by Team Y? That's this result. It's enormous for the stature of the club. And as I say, it's one of these ones that in 25, 30 years' time, we'll all be remembering. The match over there would have been iconic anyway, the night we went to Germany and beat Dortmund 4-2. But to then make it count, it wasn't just a one-off or a fluke. But in the end, they prevailed. We did it. We knocked out Borussia Dortmund.
Do you know, that's the big thing for me, is anyone, not anyone, but it's possible to have a one-off freak result where your stars align and the other team are absolutely terrible. That happens. We see that a couple of times a season domestically, when teams beat either Rangers or Celtic, and it's just one of those things. Everything goes right for you. It shouldn't happen, but it can. But I think, David, for me, is to beat Dortmund away is incredible, and that's brilliant, and that's what a small team can hope to do at one point. But to then go and finish the job in the way that we did, and I guess quite comfortably in the end, despite the nerves, etc. in the stadium.
Despite how it felt.
Yeah.
It was funny because you and I and a colleague that we were sitting with, we turned to each other with about 5 minutes left, and we said, I think Dortmund, in the Scottish parlance, have chucked this. But it wasn't that they weren't trying to score. It was just that they didn't believe they were going through. They had accepted, the night. But we didn't feel like that, neither did the other 50,000 Rangers fans in the stadium. Right up until, it was 90, there was 4 minutes injury time, and it was 92-30. They got a free kick that we defended, and I said to you, yeah, I think that's it now. We have a brave prediction with 55 seconds left.
When Morelos connected cleanly with that ball for the first time in about 2 years, when he was clearing it, I was like, oh, we're done. Anyway, Ross, you weren't alive when we beat Parma, I don't think, or at least you weren't even one yet. So I'm going to assume that this result for you is as massive as it is for us. I want to get a wee bit of a flavour of your thoughts pre-game. Obviously, as David said, 4-2 going into it. I had confidence that we had a chance. I would have still put us as marginal favourites, I think, just because of what we've seen last week in terms of how we could get at Dortmund. But what were you up to pre-match? What were your thoughts heading into the game?
It's such a cliche to say it, but I was very much of the mind that the first goal last night would have been absolutely massive, and maybe you could argue it didn't necessarily pan out of that way in terms of the way the first half went, especially. But I thought if Dortmund got ahead early, and they nearly did, of course, for hitting the post, then that gives them such a massive lift. And with the fact that the away goal rule has changed and we're only doing this off of aggregate score lines now, it would have given them such a massive boost going forward in the game. So riding that kind of storm out early doors, I thought was really important, and then be able to get the goal. But pre-game, very much the kind of usual for me. I was speaking to my friends and I was speaking to my dad about it. I would probably go along the same lines as you, Adam, having us as marginal favourites, but with a massive caveat, like I said, of that first goal being absolutely huge. I was fortunate enough to be at the Borussia Dortmund press conference on Wednesday as well, speaking to Marco Rose and Marco Royce, and the interesting bits of information that I got from them is that last week they were far more annoyed, and it's a very Rangers attitude actually, it's one that we would hold ourselves as. They were very, very annoyed at their own performance. I think it was Marco Royce said that he wasn't surprised at the way Rangers played last Thursday in terms of their high intensity, but he was surprised at the way they reacted to it, which indicated to me at least that they'd had a discussion about it and were going to come out the traps flying. Now I think we all thought that. I don't think we needed to be told that. And that, to be fair, is what they've done in the first half. So they're going into the game and they really, really pushed us back. And we'll talk about the tactical change at halftime in due course. I'm more than sure about that. but you're riding out that storm, and then to get the first goal with a penalty and to do really well to get up the pitch. It was really the first time that we properly threatened getting up the pitch as well, and obviously won a penalty out of it. I thought that was absolutely massive. You mentioned there, Adam, about Parma. I think I said in our group chat last night, this is the best one in my conscious memory. And I say conscious, not living, because I was just about for Parma, although I wasn't obviously conscious enough yet to witness it. And I think I speak for a lot of people in my generation as well. I'm only 23, and let's be honest, we were robbed of those nights for the best part of a decade. It's not just one of the biggest results in our own history, it's one of the biggest results in Scottish football's history as well. It's incredible, and it's one of the ones that you do tell the grandkids about. It's one of the ones you'll still be speaking about in 30, 40 years' time. And David, you mentioned it yourself about the kind of Kiev scale. I know that's what everything in terms of atmosphere Ibrox is rated against, but my God, it's up there for sure.
Martin and I were talking about this on the show that we do on Patreon about his show Dominant, about 1986 to 98, and we talked about that Kiev game, and you can't manufacture an atmosphere like that, and it doesn't matter. You can you can hand out flags, or you can try and whip the crowd up before a match, and we see on the continent that you get ultras with the organised displays, but you can't force it. It just happens, or it doesn't. There's something in the air. You can't bottle it. You can't predict it. Sometimes it happens unexpectedly. Adam, you'll remember the match against Kilmarnock in 2003, the week before Helicopter Sunday, when Ibrox just was nuts and nobody could quite figure out why. And last night was that, because of the level of opposition, because of the opportunity that was there, because it was Europe, and people had been buzzing, looking forward to it. Last night was the most sort of ticket requests I can remember for a non late in the season Old Firm match or cup final. People were desperate to get to the match last night, and there was something in the air, as the cliche goes, and you could sense it. And throughout the game, it was that ebb and flow. It wasn't that sort of that we talk a lot, I think, in the UK about the German thing of just singing for 90 minutes. But I believe it or not, I'm not a huge fan of that, because I think it becomes background noise. It doesn't mean anything. A British crowd I like, because we go with the flow of the game. And that works both ways. Sometimes when your team's under the cosh, you get a bit nervous, but then you come out and you roll them on, and it's totally focused in on what happens in the match. And that was the case last night. And there were points when the team came out. It was unbelievable when the kickoff took place, and then when that second goal went in, and at the final whistle, it was like a sonic boom. An airplane taking off next to the stadium, you wouldn't have heard it. It was just incredible. And there is something, again, it's a cliche, but I don't care, because it's true. There's something special about that place under the lights. There's something special about it. It feels like the centre of the whole universe. And last night, it was. You did know that everyone's watching this game. If their team weren't playing, this is the fixture people were tuning in for, to see if Rangers could see the job over the line. And I think the fact that we did it, and in the way that we did it, because we got the goal and we're in a good spot, and you're feeling pretty good, pretty confident. And then I think we got a little spooked on the park. I think that the team did get caught between, is that job done? Do we sit in now and defend, or do we go and keep doing what we've been doing? And in the end, they sort of did neither. A couple of mistakes lead to Dortmund goals. And at half time, I think, I was fearful. I think we all were. You're defiant, and you're going, come on, right, we can turn this, we can go in and do this. We're still ahead. But there was this sense of maybe that's the spell broken. Maybe that's them coming back into it. And Rangers, of course, made the tactical changes at half-time, were superb in the second half, dominated the opening 20 of the second half, and in that period got the goal. And we're the better team. And I think it's not unreasonable to say that, there are obviously spells in each half. I think Rangers were the better team for 3 out of 4 of these halves. And that's the thing about this. This was not... Leon was a wonderful night, but it was a smash and grab, that we defended with our life and we hit them brilliantly 3 times. But this was not that. Rangers were the better side for 3 of these 4 halves, and thoroughly deserved the outcome.
That's something I want to dig into a wee bit. We'll come on to the actual game aspect of it in a wee bit, but that's something I really want to dig into. Ross, I guess we've seen maybe three different types of Rangers victory, if you like. We've seen, as David mentioned, a kind of smash and grab, which can always happen. We've maybe seen kind of backs to the walls European victories. We're probably more used to those where we don't really get a kick. We're lucky to get away with a draw, or we get beat, something like that. But we don't really threaten. But this iteration that we see now, and we have been seeing over the last 3 or 4 years, is the best run in Europe in my lifetime, and everybody's lifetime probably, in terms of how we're able to stamp our own authority on the play. We've got a forward who is elite at bullying any level of defender. We really undervalue just how important that is. We've all watched since get a chance to get out. Things like that, the one-touch play, we've got Kent, you've got Tavernier, you've got Arfield all combining to play really, really fast counter-attacking effective football. I think it's one thing to beat a team like Dortmund, but as David said, 3 out of the 4 halves for me, we dominated them.
David mentioned a lot of the qualities that you need to be able to take a game to a team like Dortmund earlier on. You talked about grit, determination, tactical nous, skill. But the one thing you didn't mention was belief. And I think that's one of the key things that this Rangers team has in Europe now. There isn't a fear there of anyone, and that's an incredible and remarkable quality to have. Now, I've mentioned before on the network that my first match going season was 07-08, so I'm very much brought up in the mode of we sit back, we defend, and we'll try grabbing away goal when we can now. So that's not the case anymore. The game has moved on. But the belief that this team carries in Europe, and that has been built up over a number of years, is just astounding, because last night doesn't happen if, and it sounds so simplistic to say, but I think there's a lot of merit in it, if we don't maybe make that qualification the first year of Europe, and we don't then get out of the group stages, and we don't come back against Braga. That's the culmination of a lot of those things. It's not a one-off. And like you said, to go toe-to-toe with Dortmund and be, for 3 out of 4 halves of football, a better team than them, that requires a hell of a lot of belief as much as anything else. And that is, last night was a culmination of everything that we've been working towards in a European sense, at least for the last couple of years as well. And that's what you could see in the players as well. They genuinely did believe they could go toe-to-toe with Dortmund and beat them. And if they believe that they can go toe-to-toe with Dortmund and beat them, they can believe they can do that with anyone else as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not getting ahead of myself or anything silly like that. There's still a hell of a lot of quality teams left in that tournament, but the belief, even again, that they would take from that would skyrocket. I mean, the confidence must be stratospheric after last night. And you need that. You really need to believe in your heart and soul that you can go and be able to compete with these teams. And Rangers do now, which I think is a massive key difference from before. And you mentioned there about some of the individual players like Ryan Kent, Alfredo, Morelos, James Tavernier. These are all seasoned European players now. They've been there and they've done it and they've been on that European journey with us as well. So it's an incredible story. And as I say, I think that's the culmination last night of multiple years of building towards a result like that, one of the biggest and best in our history.
David, let's talk a little bit about the game. First half, we lined up same setup, same starting 11 as last week. We spoke pre-game about that and how it probably was the right approach that or the right team that we would pick. However, we might have had some concerns around fitness or durability or players that are able to cope. I think we maybe seen a little bit of that in the first half, and I maybe focus around Arfield and possibly Bassey. Might be a little harsh in Bassey, but certainly Arfield, I thought in the first half, Tavernier was kind of stranded a little bit. Marco Rose was out the touchline screaming at Meunier to switch the play. That was clearly something that they were trying to do to isolate either fullback. I think they did a fairly decent job at it. You could argue both goals were down flanks, so you could argue that there were some issues in that side. I just thought they pulled us apart a little bit, and I don't mean ripped us apart. I mean in our kind of shape. Jack and Lundstram couldn't quite get a handle on it. Arfield wasn't tucking in, neither was Aribo, and it was a wee bit of a mismatch. I still think at half-time we were probably just about unlucky to go in at 2-1 down, but it wasn't a huge difference. What was your thoughts on the first half?
I thought Meunier was actually very influential and a real difference maker from what we witnessed last week. Unsurprising, the Belgian international, former PSG player, now Borussia Dortmund. He's quite good. And I think that they missed him badly in the second half because he started a lot of those moves with the crossfield passing and then being available, Adam, to take the return. And it reminded me a little bit of when we played Benfica away the first 15 minutes before Benfica got the red card, when you're thinking this is a quality outfit, because it's ball played and they kill it instantly. That's one of the things that you always notice in European football. They can start looking at the next pass before the ball arrives, whereas British players tend to have to control the ball, but concentrate on that and then do it. And that's definitely something that we that we can notice in these matches. But yeah, they were. I think Arfield didn't quite know where to be in the first half. And his timing was a little off. He seemed to be arriving when the ball was leaving, and they did get Tav exposed quite a lot. Barisic, we know there's a confidence issue at the moment, and a few times he got the ball and just looked to get rid of it as soon as he could, and he played a few passes that put his teammates in trouble, and it was no surprise that he got taken off, because a couple of times you pointed out to me that Van Bronckhorst on the touchline was raging after Barisic had just given up easy possession, and they swamped us and they pressed well. They pressed as a unit. They made sure there was no easy possession for Rangers, and turnovers will kill you at that level. They really will, and that was what they were forcing. And then when they got the ball, it was left to right. And look, it's frustrating as a fan. We're sitting watching it, but the amount of work the Rangers players are having to do just to stand still, if you know what I mean, just to kind of keep their shape, because that's why they're doing it. You're chasing a ball constantly, you're being moved all over the field, they're trying to exploit, find a bit of room, find a bit of space. The timing that they have of when they want to go is top drawer, and they've got guys in the middle of the park that can link up, can time a run into the box, lovely little patterns of passes. How many times did they spring the move? It was a little triangle where the fullback knocks it into a forward who drops and plays a ball round the corner, and the third man's away, and they did it time after time. And I think that the shape that they'd adopted, I think, did take Rangers a little by surprise in the first half, and that's what prompted the tactical change at half-time for Rangers, which, as we'll come to and very enjoyably discuss, we'll talk about. Added to that, I don't think Connor Goldson had a great night. I think he looked a little nervy at times, and there were a few errors from him, one of which, of course, led to a goal. And I think there was just this sense that Dortmund felt if they kept doing what they were doing, that they would find gaps, and of course they did in the first half, and they got two. In the second half, I was raging at half time, as you know, because I was raging at you. I wanted us to be brave. I felt that every time, even in that first half, we'd attacked, we'd looked threatening, we'd created a chance. I didn't rate their defence at all, and I thought that Alfie has the measure of the centre backs, who clearly just did not want any part of them whatsoever. And I felt that Ken and Arfield, I've criticised them maybe defensively in the first half, although I thought he was excellent in the second. But we did have, when we went up, we created chances and we created havoc. And I wanted us to be brave, because I felt that we did drop a little bit deep. And I think that sometimes as supporters, we put that down to the manager's telling them to drop deep. He wasn't. He was telling them the opposite. He was telling them to push up. You could see it. They're a good side you're playing, and sometimes they force you back, and that's what happened in the first half. But in the second half, when we changed shape, we were much more confident about starting 20 yards further forward and not retreating that far back. And I just thought that, as I say, what really impressed me is, Adam, there were lessons to be learned in the first half, and we learned them at half time and then adapted to them in the second half. We put them right. I've seen Rangers teams in Europe, and Ross made a point earlier about belief. I think I'm guilty of this, and I think a lot of people my age are. We grew up in the 90s, and that scarred us in terms of European performance. It really did, because we saw so often Rangers teams not learning lessons, over seasons, not over matches. So to see the team adapt so quickly was incredible. And I think that they had to, because if we'd have gone on with the system that we'd started with, and just said, try to play better, or made a personnel change, maybe, just take Barisic off, put Bassey to left back, but sticking with the same shape, I think we would have ended up getting the same sort of thing happening. It was the fact that we saw what they were doing and we combated it, and we got a break with Muni not being able to come out for the second half. But you've got to take those.
Yeah, I think that's the really satisfying part of it. For me, is we debated whether is it a game for Sakala to replace Arfield or maybe Davis to come on or something. But I think you're right, based on the setup that we had and the setup that they had, it kind of felt at half time like it was trending one way. I completely agree with your points on Arfield as well. We can be not critical, but we can understand that he needs managed, and therefore at some point one of these games is going to be a game too far. But regardless, the ball gravitates to him in the box. We've seen that chance. He will wriggle away and he'll find an opening. He might not have the finesse about it, but it gets to him. He's just got that innate ability. So for that reason alone, it might not be perfect. It might not be as well structured as we like it to be, but things will happen. And I think the frustration for me going into half time was that we knew that we could get chances against them. We'd had 2 or 3, as you mentioned, that link-up play getting through, the chance I mentioned when Arfield probably should square it to Kent, and Morelos hits the follow-up as well. We had a couple of those kind of opportunities. So while we were under the cosh at times, we were capable, and I thought I just wanted to see a bit more from us. I didn't expect the 3 at the back switch so early, if I'm honest. Ross, that happened at half-time, and as David said, it was quite bold. Okay, Barisic coming off and Balogun goes on probably feels like a defensive switch, I guess. And it is, or everyone listening to this knows I'm not a massive fan of 3 at the back, but I have caveated it before to say because Rangers are in possession so much, 3 at the back doesn't really make sense to me. In this game, and equally away in Dortmund, the understanding there was in Dortmund we're defending a lead, and in this game I guess we are also defending a lead, but in a slightly different way. So I understood it coming at that point. I was surprised it came as early as it did. Really, really impressed with it in terms of the switch. As David said, it's really refreshing that we've got a coach who will sit at pre-game and say, I've got 3 options for this game. I'm not going to go with this one from the start because I think it's a little bit too defensive. But at some point it's coming on, and the team can just seamlessly switch to it. We've seen Balogun come on, as I said, and Lundstram slotted in the middle of the back 3 next to Balogun and Goldson. Bassey moved to left wing back, Tavernier to right wing back, and Kent and Morelos up top. I just felt it took the sting out of Dortmund completely. Ross, I don't think they really got to grips with that formation at all, really, but certainly not before we managed to get the equaliser.
Yeah, it was a tactical change that changed the game, and David, you mentioned there, if we came back out in a similar shape, then the same thing would have happened. We'd be having this conversation right now because Dortmund were getting so much joy in an attacking sense going up against our 4 at the back. I know I'm on the same page with you, Adam. I think we've spoke about it before on Extra that for a run-of-the-mill league game, for example, on Sunday, 3 at the back is an absolute non-starter for me. But I'd said a couple of times before on other shows that just because we've not played 3 at the back before and started games like that doesn't mean with the level of tactical flexibility that this team now has, we wouldn't move to it during a game. So obviously that had a twofold effect last night. So the first thing it done was the most important one. It was it completely neutralised Dortmund's attack. They did not get anywhere near the same level of joy in the second half as they did in the first. I believe they only had 1 shot on target in the second half, which tells its own story. And the second thing that it done, and this is the crucial thing for the goal that we'll talk about, is it allowed Bassey and Tav a much greater level of freedom to actually get up the pitch themselves. And you've seen obviously that work to effect for the goal, but even before that there was a couple of opportunities, and even after it as well, where Bassey and Tav, the 2 of them getting up the pitch, were causing them all sorts of bother, especially on the break. So as I said, the full credit has to go to Gio for managing to make that change, because if we don't do that, then we're probably sitting here talking about a completely different game and a completely different result. So to have let's be honest, the balls, the gumption, whatever you want to call it, to do that at half time, to say, no, this is what we're going to go with, and figuring that out in the game himself, I think the management team deserve an awful lot of credit, because it's one thing just to go in and beat Dortmund on the park, but we beat them off it as well in the dugout, and that's something that really impressed me.
David, second half, we mentioned earlier on about moments that the crowds and the team just kind of synchronised together. I think maybe I'm projecting here, but certainly when we came out and we seen that new setup, we started with a wee bit more purpose and a wee bit more vigour. We had, I think, one or two chances for Morelos prior to Tavernier's goal. We turned to each other a couple of minutes before it. We were in the ascendancy. I think we dominated that 15 minutes or so up to the goal and just after it. And we turned to each other and said, the crowd are with the team here. You can see it all bubbling one way. We just need to get a goal at this point to really seal the deal. And lo and behold, we did. And I thought it was a fantastic goal. Obviously, the finish is sublime anyway, but just the build up to it, the way that we worked it, the desire and passion from Bassey, and then Morelos, very cute with his movement round about Hummels to maybe force him into an error and leave the space for Tavernier. It was just one of those kind of perfectly synchronised moments where the crowd were expecting and the team delivered.
Oh, it was. It was absolutely glorious. You'd said to me actually a couple of minutes before, we've got to score in this period because we were on top, and you kind of knew that if Dortmund got through it, they would take something out of it. They would take, right, that's them shot their ball, let us, go on, and at the time, one more and we're going to extra time. And it was fantastic. Bassey, who made a real difference in that second half, with an absolutely terrific performance. What was great about Bassey, I thought last night, Adam, was his maturity, because when he went forward, he got something, whether it was a throw-in or a free kick or got the ball across or recycle possession. He wasn't running up the park and losing the ball and exposing us. He was getting us up the park and getting us something, but he kept battling. And then you're looking at the back, is someone coming in on that? Poor defending from the German side. They had the opportunity to clear it and they failed. And in runs Tav at the back post, and it's not an easy finish because you've got to control that, and he does. And bedlam ensues. It was just one of those moments, just absolutely sensational. Everybody in that stadium, including us on the gantry, the press area didn't bother with neutrality at that point. Everybody was just going nuts because it felt decisive. I think, there's nerves going, right, keep it tight, 10 minutes, all that stuff. But there are two incidents in this tie that I think turn this tie in Rangers' direction. And that might sound a little silly in that, well, we scored 6 goals, so clearly there were more. But when Dortmund scored last week to make it 3-1, we were in that stadium. They thought, here comes a comeback. Their fans thought it, their players thought it, their manager thought it. We thought it, if we're being honest, right? Okay, we were in a lovely dream, but they've just woken us and they'll come back now. And then Rangers go up the park and score. And that was huge. That was definitive. That won us that game that night. Last night, it was the second goal, because Dortmund at half-time, and I think any neutral would be feeling, they're gonna come through now, Dortmund, and win this game. Might take extra time, but they're going to do it. Their quality will show. When Rangers came out and played that second half, and again, there is a limit to what running about and commitment can do for you. We talk about it a lot, and if you don't have it, you're screwed. But you've got to match it with skill and bravery. And bravery isn't kicking somebody as he's running by you. Bravery is about demanding the ball when there's 3 extremely talented pressing opponents on you, and still taking it and not losing it and going forward. And Rangers displayed all of that in that opening 20. And when we got the reward, which was just and deserved, I think there was this sense of, on both sides, I think what we did with that second goal is we said to Borussia Dortmund, we're not going away. You expect us to at one point pick up the jackets and head for home, and we're not going to do this. So it's going to be a scrap and a struggle right to the end. And I felt that they lost a bit of heart at that point, which is understandable. We would have as well. It's the way the game had got. It's why football is beautiful. It's so balanced, and moments can change it, and periods of play can change it. And there was just a sense in the stadium of, this is now very much in our hands. I probably wouldn't have put a fiver at that point on it being the last goal of the game. I didn't feel that. But afterwards, there was a new sense of determination, I think, Rangers defensively. But I just thought that it was, I've spoken about the skill and I've spoken about the mentality, and those are both hugely valuable. But there was the effort, the extra 10%, the kind of, squeezing everything out, that if a Rangers player ran into trouble, he didn't lie there or protest to the ref. He was up in the same movement trying to scrap for the ball again. And by making everything so difficult for Dortmund, that it just became mentally for them, I think, a struggle too far. And as we said, I think for me, the real sign is when they took off Marco Reus and put on Axel Witsel. Now, Axel Witsel is a genuinely world-class player, but he's a defensive midfielder. And when you're chasing 2 goals in 5 minutes and you do that, I think that's about, let's give him some minutes and save Marco for the weekend. And I think that was very much what they did do.
Yeah, it's easy to look back in hindsight, but I agree. I think from 75 onwards, it was only going one way, and it shouldn't have been the last goal of the game, which we'll come on to in a wee second. But Ross, I just want to dial back a little bit and talk about Calvin Bassey again. It's really promising, I think, that we've got a player like Bassey who is so flexible. Obviously, we moved very obviously to that back three last night, but having someone like Bassey who can play as a wing back, a left back, a left centre back in a 2, and also a left centre back in a 3 is huge for us. The flexibility that gives the team in game without even having to make any substitutions is really great. If you think about it, last night we could have moved to that formation and had Lundstram in the middle and had Barisic as a left wing back if we decided to do that in game without having to make a substitution. We did make the sub last night, but we might not need to in other situations, and it will just completely change how we play. So effectively having a player like him, and on the other side, a player like Tavernier who can play in 4 different positions and play. He's coming on leaps and bounds. I always remember the game away to Standard Liège where he came on in the rain and he had a really big impact, but he was kind of all over the place, slipping and sliding and using his physicality to get through. The improvement over the last year has been phenomenal. Even his crossing as well, I think, is coming on leaps and bounds from earlier in the season. He's just this force of energy, and he can get by on his pace and his power when he needs to, but he's actually a really good footballer as well.
It's funny you mentioned there about his crossing as well. When I was texting some of my mates about the result last night, I made the same point. I think his end product is improving absolutely tenfold. And listen, Adam, you mentioned there his improvement over the last couple of years. Even his improvement this season, from a positional sense, is night and day. If you think back to some of the games earlier on in the season away from home in Europe, one in particular definitely does spring to mind, where we were a mess at the back. Now, don't get me wrong, that wasn't our usual centre-back pairing that night away in Sparta Prague, but we were a mess, right? And it was a riot, positionally all over the place, giving up chances left, right and centre. How we didn't concede more than a single goal that night is truly beyond me. And you're thinking at that point, right, Bassey's never a centre-half, it's a natural left-back, and that is where we have him. I'll be honest, I kind of pigeonholed him at that point, thinking just not a centre-half, doesn't have the positional sense for it, doesn't have the awareness for it, and keep him at left back, that's where we should develop him. But obviously through injuries and no fault of his own, he has had to play more as a centre half this season, and that has forced that development. But my God, I think it's helped him, and I think it's helped him as a left back as well, because I think his positional sense, even as a left back, has improved tenfold from that as well. So to have that level of flexibility in a player like that, and to have it in both full backs, is quite unique as well. And you mentioned Tav there, I know you're his biggest fan, but he deserves a lot of credit for that as well. You can imagine that they help one another out with that, essentially with Tav being the kind of captain that he is and leading by example. There's no way that he's not had those recurring conversations and be able to help talk Bassey through that transition. So it's really, really impressive to see. I think there possibly is now a conversation to be had about Borna Basic's long-term future at Rangers. Perhaps that conversation's already started, I don't know, but for me, at least, it's Bassey's shirt to lose now. For sure, I don't think that's arguable at this point.
I don't think we can keep going through this with Borna, that every 6 to 8 months he has a crisis of confidence and you lose him for 2-3 months, and he does bounce back, to his credit. But this is the 3rd time we've been through one of these periods with him. And for me, I think the upside of Bassey now is far bigger long term. I think he's the future, but I also think he's the present at the moment, because, as you mentioned, yes, he can probably get by on his athleticism, let's be honest, especially in Scotland, but there's a lot more to him than that. He's a good passer of the ball. As I say, he's intelligent. His game management last night was tremendous. I thought that he as I say, in Europe, can he lose the ball? Because 15 seconds later, it can be in your net. And that's something Rangers in the 90s never learned. That you give the ball away in Scotland, you'll probably get it back soon. You give it away in Europe, you might not see it for 15 minutes. And he was tremendous at that last night. And Gio was very taken with the goal last night in the press conference. He said after it, it's my left back crossing to my right back for a goal. And he loved it. He absolutely loved it. But they both have that ability, and his end product is improving. We can be a little bit like, we're all in favour of bringing in guys and improving them, but what we mean by that is we bring them in day one, and in day two they're much better, because we're football fans and we're impatient. But you can see with Bassey that sort of raw potential that he's always had is beginning to, he's beginning to look more like a cut diamond than an uncut one. And his upside is huge. I mean, if you're blessed with that sort of physical attributes, then that's one thing. It gives you an advantage straight away. But you do have to then marry it to the rest of the match and the boring stuff. The stuff about being in the right position, making sure that you're tight when you're supposed to be, and that you're in line with the rest of your defence. And he's clearly improving on that. And I thought he was terrific last night. I thought he played a huge part in the second half. Slightly different position as well, playing at wing back. It's not as straightforward. Two other guys I want to pick out. One is John Lundstram, whose renaissance in the last few weeks has been fantastic to see. I think a lot of us had sort of written that one off as just a signing that wouldn't work. And I'd probably include myself in that one, in all honesty. And he's come back in now, slightly different role to the one he had before, and he's been tremendous in it. Last night he gets put to centre of a three, and you see the thinking of, well, he's a good passer and he can sweep and the other two can go and do all the centre half stuff, and it worked perfectly. But the control he showed, he was on a booking, and incidentally, it's my favourite booking of this season.
Oh, I was going to say that myself. It's the best booking I've ever seen arranged. And we don't do enough of that. The Dark Arts.
We don't do enough of that.
But it was
right.
brilliant. I stood up and applauded it.
He made sure that he brought the guy down while making sure that it wasn't a red card offence, that he wouldn't, get done on us. Because you can, when you're deliberately fouling somebody, you can get done on a straight red. But he took the boy out nice and cleanly. He had to, because they were away. And he took his yellow card, and then he didn't fly into any. I mean, there was no risk after. He never once went into a tackle and you went, oh, he doesn't have any. He didn't do it. He was just so commanding. And one of the reasons for, as I say, his renaissance is Ryan Jack. Now, I'll have to hold my hands up and say in the past, I maybe wasn't Ryan Jack's biggest fan. And a lot of people would probably have to do the same. I think in the era of Jackarama, as it was called, there was this criticism that it was too defensive and we didn't need two holders and all the rest of it. The old phrase, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, has never been more apposite than it's been in the last few weeks, because he's been tremendous. His all-round game is so intelligent, and people next to him play better. For Rangers, for Scotland, people next to him play better when he's there. Now, a lot of that's to do with his character as well, that he's the type of guy that people look to lead, and he's the type of guy that people want next to them in the trenches. But he was just absolutely sensational. He plays with a level of control and discipline, but also he drives on the team and he controls the tempo. And I think that, if there's a player of the month, it's him. He was being absolutely superb for Rangers. And last night, he's up against some top drawer players, and it was the calmness, and he exuded it. And at times when Rangers could have lost their heads or get caught up and stuff, and even in a good way, even in the second half, you can get caught up in the cavalry charge and get picked off on the break, and he wouldn't have allowed that. I thought he was sensational. And I just, two guys who, maybe 6 weeks ago, none of us would have considered to be first team players. Right now, it's first name in the team sheet thing. Well, second behind Morelos
and Tavernier.
Tavernier, sorry. Yes.
I feel like this is going to be one of these podcasts where we just mention every player. So we will come on to Kent and Morelos in a second, but I just want to double back on that Jack point particularly. I think you're spot on, and obviously anybody who listens to Tactics Talk on Patreon from a couple of years back would know my thoughts on that Jack and Kamara pairing, I guess, primarily. But the thing is, people are allowed to have an opinion, and then things change, because the player that we've seen last night in Ryan Jack and the player that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, that's a different type of player to the player that played 2019-20, 2018-19. A completely different type of player. He was much more defensive in those games. We tried to turn him into a box-to-box midfielder like Scott Arfield to get into the box and get on the end of chances. It didn't work at all. His performances were good, but it didn't work. We let ourselves down in crucial moments. And a little bit of that started creeping back in on Sunday, if we're honest, at Dundee United. We had the forwards not really shown well enough in the first half, or not having that quality, and Jack and Lundstram were pushing forward trying to get into the box, which is not their skill set. So that, I think, is where a criticism comes from. But I really rail against this idea that because you've said a player didn't play well 2 or 3 years ago, that means you have to stick to that.
You're not allowed to. I hate that as well.
And you're not allowed.
And people, for some reason, will come to you and say, "Ah, well, you never used to like him." Yeah, I was wrong.
And then he played better, and
yeah,
he played. Support. It's a strange one.
Yeah, circumstances change, my opinions change. As evidence change, my opinions change. I always rated him. I always thought he was a good player. I just did have the wonder, do we need him? Because there were games where him and Kamara were just sitting there, and that was, that was at the time Gerrard, especially in his first couple of seasons, his natural conservatism, that he told them to do that. And as you say, then we tried him in a different role, and he was good in it, but it didn't suit the team. But where he's playing right now, where Van Bronckhorst has him as, to dust down a cliche, midfield general, just the leader of that midfield area, because they do all respect him and they do all look up to him. And I think he just exudes a certain calmness. He's brilliant at stopping the opposition coming forward and then just starting us going. And he's always available for the pass. And the kind of guy I compare him to, believe it or not, is Stephen Davis. Because Stephen Davis is tremendous at that. Just you'd love to play with these guys, because whenever you find yourself, you maybe run up a blind alley, you turn around and they're there to take that ball and recycle it, and suddenly Rangers are on their way again, as opposed to breaking down and losing possession. But I think it's not only about his own performances, it's about what he brings to the team. It's a lovely quality, and again, we spoke earlier about not being able to manufacture it. It's a lovely quality for a player to have, to know that he makes 3 or 4 guys round about him play 10% better just by being there, and Ryan Jack has that.
There's a mentality side of it as well, absolutely, that he won't let that slip, regardless of being that platform and the base and the support. There's a mentality there that he's not going to give in. He's going to be in the trenches next to you. Whereas there may be some players that over the last couple of years that when the going gets tough, they'll maybe revert into their shadow and look for Tavernier, Morelos, Kent to bail them out. That's not going to be Jack. But the big thing I've noticed since he come back is how quick he moves the ball and how aggressive he is with moving the ball, which is a huge difference. So I think he's been fantastic. I would agree with you. He's been the player of the month so far. I like to call that never changing your opinion Tavernieritis, because you sold a goal in a cup final 6 years ago. I'm never allowed to praise you without criticising you in case someone casts it back up. It's just it's a strange thing. I don't get it. Players change, players evolve, opinions can change, opinions can evolve. And I think that's absolutely fine. But I agree. I thought Jack was crucial last night, as he was in the away leg too. Only 2 left to talk about then, I guess. And it, for me, it was the stars of the show, really, I think, in terms of Kent and Morelos. Ross, I'll come to you first. First half, I thought Kent was good first half, and it was the Kent that you always see in a tough game. Off the ball, absolutely immaculate. Winning it back, winning free kicks off Immunier down the touchline, getting into positions, maybe not quite getting the support from Bassey that he needed outside of the penalty, which I thought Bassey did very, very well to go on his blind side and take Immunier away to set Kent up 1-on-1 for that penalty trip. But I thought he was a shining light in that half, maybe more off the ball than on the ball. And Morelos, in that first half, I thought did his job well, occupied well without really having a huge effect on the game. But after half time, it was like both of them had been supercharged with this 5-3-2 formation. I thought that 45 minutes of football from both of them is as good a strike partnership, if you can even call those two players a strike partnership, but as good a strike partnership as I've seen in McCoy-Stately's the obvious example, but in at least 20 years from a Rangers team in this level of game, I thought both of them were absolutely electrifying every time. Not even every time they got the ball, every time the ball went 5 yards near them, you just got this feeling that something was going to happen, Ross.
They were terrified of him. Like, it's funnily enough, I kind of joked this morning that my voice was quite sore, and to be fair, it was quite sore because every single time Ryan Kent touched the ball, I was screaming, "They're terrified of you," and they were. It's not, Billy Big Balls after the moment. They were genuinely scared of Ryan Kent last night. And
they had 4 covering him every time.
You don't even get that
in the
Scotland.
First half. No, you don't.
Get that in Scotland.
There would be 2 who would go to him instantly, and 2 who would take up positions around him to try and smother, so he couldn't even get the ball out. It was, in terms of respect, you're absolutely correct. And him and Alfie, that they clearly said after the first leg, understandably, we need to deal with these 2, and they couldn't.
But what that does is that creates space for other players. I mean, you've seen it down the right-hand side, especially the amount of joy we were getting with Tav getting space down that side because Ryan Kent was dragging so many over to him down the left. It was quite extraordinary to sit and watch, actually, but I thought Morelos, especially as an out ball, and you need that. You really, really need that from Morelos in a game like that. If we are having spells in the game where we're under the cosh and we just need to get the ball away, I thought it stuck to him perfectly last night. And his Ranger passing, especially in the second half, Adam used the word supercharged. That's exactly the word for them. That's the Ranger passing. He would display off the back of that. He'd bring the ball down and he'd move it on, but not just a sideways back pass or something like that. He'd spray it about in a way that we are seeing a lot more of him now. It's not just something from last night. It's been a theme in the last couple of weeks with Morelos as well. It's really, really positive to see. And you mentioned it being good, kind of quote-unquote strike partnerships you've ever seen. Yeah, it is 100%. It's like alchemy watching the two of them at their best. It really, really is.
A strike partnership is more than having 2 guys playing together. And I know that sounds very self-evident, but it's true. You can have 2 good players, but a strike partnership is knowing that when he gets the ball in this position, I should be over here. Or when I get the ball, I need to play it there because he'll be moving. That's what they had last night.
A subconscious understanding.
A subconscious understanding of knowing where the other would be and knowing what the other was going to do at any given point. And because of that, Dortmund were left chasing a game, remember, needing to go and score. You've got to keep that element of doubt on the side. See if they know that nothing's sticking and you've no threat, they can just pile forward and they'll suffocate you. They will. Because eventually you're going to make an error against a top side. They're going to keep probing and you're going to make an error. But the fact they couldn't do that, they had to leave guys back. They had to be aware of the ball going up to Morelos. It was likely to stick, or at least it was going to be disputed possession. It wasn't going to be a comfortable take for a defender and then he can just start the move again. It was going to be a bit of a fight. So they had to keep their midfield shuttling backwards and forwards. But I thought the 2 of them were tremendous. And I thought in terms of levels of skill that they both showed, the amount of times that Kent cut inside and went past guys and won as a corner or got a shot away or got a cross in was terrific. And then you add in Alfredo working so hard and getting people up with him, getting shots off as well. He didn't get a goal last night, but it was all that was missing.
I think that really impressed me there as well. It was a bit more than just keeping them honest. It was a genuine threat that we carried from the 2 of them across the entirety of the 2 legs, let's be honest, not just last night or even just the second half. And that was absolutely massive. And the thing with Alfredo as well, he goes through with 2-on-1 with the keeper. Maybe an earlier version of Alfredo doesn't have the maturity just to square that. The simple pass, and look, very, very unlucky for that goal not to stand. I believe that is the rule, although I'm not going to do the Scottish punditry thing of, I don't like that rule, therefore it's not valid. If that's the rule, then yes, okay, fair enough. It's just intensely frustrating. But I was very, very impressed with that as well. And it seems like such a stupid thing, just that wee side-yard, 5-yard pass for an open net. But it showed the relationship and the maturity there that's developing in both the players, not just Alfie, that really, really impressed me as well. And I was very, very happy to see it.
This is where I always rail against the Ryan Kent output thing. I do think he should have more assists than he does, but I think there's maybe an element of luck in there and just maybe lacking that killer instinct. But in years to come, we look back on this Dortmund doubleheader and I think Ryan Kent the stats will say Ryan Kent got 1 assist for John Lundstram. And it was a kind of set-up assist for a fantastic finish. So the stats will tell you that, okay, he won the penalty as well, doesn't count as an assist. But you look back on it and think, he got 1 assist in that, great. But it just doesn't tell the story at all.
He terrorised Borussia Dortmund for 180. Well, for 180 minutes because again they had 4 on him and he still won a penalty. No,
that's
exactly.
You need the context. You need the context of it, I think, to say what he gives is more than that. It is absolutely, I think, key that we up the number of goals and assists that we get from our forward line, and Kent is a part of that, and he plays the most minutes in that. But what he gives you outside of that, to me, is just immeasurable, and I think we've seen it again last night. And on Morelos, I know we've briefly touched on it, but David, I'll come to you. In terms of number 9s, we spoke at the game. Kuzan could do it whenever he felt like it. Hateley,
which wasn't often.
Which wasn't often. Hateley's the only other one, but I've watched so many, even away to Parkhead or whatever, Moses Ashikodi coming on and all that sort of, where you're just lumping balls to somebody and hoping something happens. The way that he can just terrorise, we can debate Hummels in terms of his abilities now, but he's still a very, very good centre-half. Whether he's a Champions League quality centre-half is up for debate, but he's still at least a good Bundesliga. Someone like that.
Well, he's a presence, isn't he, Hummels? Regardless, because he is Mats Hummels. He's World Cup winning Mats Hummels, Champions League winning Mats Hummels. So, he's still a presence.
He is absolutely 100%, and to be able to do that to him, and to be able to see that fear, even the surrounding players, like we had Zagadou the other night, we had Schultz, Emre Can. These aren't bad players at all. To have them as terrified as maybe a domestic centre half would be playing up against them, to me is just very, very special. I don't have much more to say about Morelos as a player than we've spoke about over the last 4 or 5 years, but I just think that this moment that he's in right now, in terms of the goals and the performances, is up there with that purple patch that we had a couple of years ago in 2019. I'm really keen to see how far both of them take it, because both of them, Kent and Morelos, are in a very good moment. And it will be interesting. I know we touched on this last night on the video on Patreon, that scouts at this level, in terms of Dortmund, don't look at just these games in isolation. However, I would be amazed if the Bundesliga teams aren't pricking their ears up and looking at them and going and finding out more about them, because those performances against a team of this quality, I think most of Europe sit up and notice. So it's going to be interesting with them. Obviously, it's not ideal in terms of their contract situations, etc. But for Rangers, I think enjoying these two players in this moment just now, hopefully they give us another 15 games like that over the rest of the season, and we'll be in a better place than we are now, I would suggest.
Alfredo Morelos is a Europa League legend.
Yeah.
That's a fact. He's the 3rd top scorer in it. And if he keeps going the way he's going, he'll add even more. He is my type of striker, because look, I anybody else, I love watching these liquid, silky forward players. But give me a rampaging number 9 that defenders go home that night covered in bruises, with their knees sore from all the twisting they've had to do chasing the guy. When Alfie's like this, then the defender might as well not be there, because Alfie doesn't give him a moment's thought. Alfie just does what he wants to do, and he is a nightmare to play against. At this level, you absolutely categorically have got to have an out ball, because if you don't, you will just get relentlessly pressured and they will force a mistake. And that's not that you play badly, it's just that you cannot realistically expect your team to go 90 minutes after 90 minutes concentrated, constantly defending. It's just not fair to expect that. You've got to have somebody who can take the ball with you. And in Alfie's case, he can hold, turn and move it, and then the pace of Kent, and that's why the partnership last night worked so well. But what Alfie's got this season is, 1, he's finishing, 2, his passing is, I know he had a couple of loose ones last night, but he had some belters as well. His passing has been on point. And then to complete, if you like, the triangle, he gets the ball, he wins it, he holds it up, he plays it on, and then he gets into the box. And that to me is just perfect striking play, especially at this European level. I think he's been immense, but I think he's been immense for Rangers through most of our Euro campaigns. In all honesty, I think he's been absolutely sensational. And again, yeah, I hope he'll sign a new deal. I think he'll sign a new deal because he's happy. But eventually, if somebody came in, because I sit and honestly, Adam, I as you know, I watch a lot of English Premiership. And I look at some of the guys playing for these teams, and I genuinely think, Alfie would do, would get double your output easy down there. And I don't understand why teams don't come in from him. Maybe it can't be discipline anymore because it's been years, so it can't be that. But whatever it is that's putting them off, can it please continue to put them off? Because he's just. When you watch him put that sort of performance in for the second week in a row, incidentally, against a team like Borussia Dortmund, you wouldn't trade him.
Yeah, I just don't understand it, Ross. It's easy to think how much, I don't know, a year left to go. If we got 15 million from Morelos in the summer, I think that would be an interesting option for the club, but that's nothing to a team down south. Bottom 10, even, if you like. I think if he plays the way that he played, if he played the way that he's played over the last couple of months, I think he could go higher than that. But to not even have a sniff, and he's not been sent off in well over a year now, but that was an unlucky one against Motherwell. So you could argue we're into about 2.5 years since proper disciplinary problems. As a scout, I don't understand what people don't see or that we're missing. It seems like they think his style is more suited to maybe a European league, perhaps. But I don't get it. The one I always liken him to is Mopey at Brighton. In terms of the physicality he is, I think he's a level above him. I just find it. I find it quite strange that no one would want to take a punt at a 15 million down south for him. I'm not trying to sell him at all. I absolutely agree with David. If we get another year on his deal, or we get another couple of years and he stays at that, I'll be more than happy, I think, with the way he's playing just now. But it's just more of a curiosity thing on my side.
Yeah, it does definitely baffle me that clubs down south would rather go and spend 30-40 million on a player from the Bundesliga who's had 10 appearances and scored one goal because of the potential, rather than coming for a proven goal scorer at a top level like Morelos. It fries my brain completely, especially if you look at, you mentioned Brighton, they're doing quite well down south. Even a team like Southampton, Crystal Palace or something like that, Brentford, anyone, the fact that nobody, like you said, is sniffing about, or at least to our knowledge, it absolutely baffles me. Newcastle's another one that in the past I always thought he could go and do a turn for. Not that I'm trying to sell him at all, but the baffling thing for me is, and I'm absolutely convinced of this, is if he was putting out these kind of performances with this level of output for someone like Porto or something like that, we're throwing money at them. Absolutely throwing money at them. So I don't know if it's a snobbery thing or anything like that. It baffles me, but completely what David said, keep doing it, because I don't want to lose him. If we can get him tied down for the future as well in a longer term deal, then that's even better for us, because in that case, if someone does come in with a bid, then they're going to have to pay top dollar, whereas, like you said, if we're getting into the realms of only having a year left on his deal and someone comes in, then we maybe have to start considering it at a lower level than maybe what we'd like to.
I think probably this developer of talent thing that we see with maybe like a Porto or a Midfield or something like that. I think we undervalue that because clubs' recruitment isn't sophisticated. It is sophisticated, but there's still a lot of familiarity within it. So I think now that we've got the Patterson sale, albeit he hasn't really had much of a look in so far at Everton, but now we've got that under our belt. I think we just need to keep going with it. It may be that we missed the boat, and I've said this a few times, it may be that we missed the boat on some of the bigger names that we've got just now, and we don't get the maximum value that we could from them, such as Aribo, Morelos and Kent. However, if we do get them sold for a reasonable price and then they go on and have a bit of success elsewhere, that maybe just puts our name in clubs' mix.
I wrote a thing for the website a wee while ago now, but the point still rings true about the selling club model, and this is when it was really starting to come to the forefront of Rangers fans' conversation. The three clubs I examined as against were the three clubs that I believe Bisgrove's mentioned before that we use as benchmarks. One of them is Borussia Dortmund, another one is Porto, like I've mentioned, and the epitome of it all is obviously Ajax. And the core thing throughout the three of them is something that you've just said there, which is they have the reputation for it now. And this is something that we're going to have to build up over time. It's obviously not going to happen overnight. And that's why I was so delighted with the Patterson sale. Not to see the back of him at all. And I want to be quite clear about that. But to get the level of money and the amount of money that we did for a player like that is tremendous business on our end. There's no doubt about it at all. So if we can keep building up that sort of reputation, and it's something that I hate to say Celtic have been good at doing for years, is getting maximum value for the players. It's something that we are now playing catch up for just because of circumstances that we have found ourselves in. But if we can keep doing that over a sustained and prolonged period of time and demonstrate that we are a fantastic place to develop talent, and then if you do want to come and get that talent, you're going to have to pay top dollar to get it, then that's only a benefit to Rangers.
100%. Okay, so really memorable victory. We have Red Star Belgrade in the next round. We'll have a recap. I'm sure James will have something up on the Hangover on Patreon in the next week or so, previewing that one. Motherwell next for us, David. Press conferences happened earlier on today. Van Bronckhorst being non-committal on Ramsey. I think he's in training, so I'm not sure if the expectation is that he will start or he'll be in the squads. Let's hope so. We'll wait and see. But in terms of the challenge that we have, Motherwell are going fairly well, but really we need to be going out and putting our stamp on this game, particularly as Celtic play away to Hibs a few hours earlier, and we have to assume that will not go the way that we want it to go. So in terms of that, it's a huge game. What would you be looking at in terms of freshening up the team, if anything?
Well, you need to look at, we don't know how players are feeling, if there's any knocks after the weekend. But yeah, you've got to freshen up the side. I think Arfield could do with a rest. Jack will know his body better than anybody. So you ask him, but I'd rather have Jack away to St Johnstone than home to Motherwell. So if it's a case of maybe for his own good, just taking him out the side. I'd like to see Balogun in or Phil and push Bassey out to left full back. There is talent there that can come in. Roof, Sakala, Diallo, etc. Davis can come into midfield. Glenn Kamara can come into the middle of the park as well. So for me, that there are changes that can come in and can freshen up the side. And of course, you can have those players on the bench if you need them in the match. It won't be easy, but I'm fully expecting a victory. Our home form hasn't been the worry.
No, it hasn't. You're right. So fingers crossed we can get that. Ross, what about you? For me, I would be keen to see Sakala. He's done quite well against Motherwell. I'd probably like to see Roof too, but I'm not quite sure how we fit all these players in, like you said. So maybe an off the bench for Roof, if you like. But I think getting him back into some game time and hoping he doesn't get injured again would be quite crucial coming into the closing weeks of the season. But is there anything that either of us have said that you disagree with, or anything different that you would like to see?
No, not at all there. I think maybe freshening up the side, not even just from a fitness point of view, but just to avoid the after the Lord Mayor show type situation. As a bit of a come down really from Dortmund at home to Motherwell at home, so maybe getting a new couple of fresh faces in the starting 11 to give them a bit of game time as well is important. Only one I may be curious to see is Diallo, to see if he starts. I know people have a lot of mixed opinions. They've been very critical of him since Tannadice last Sunday, me being one of them, to be honest. But I think it's for a game to try and rebuild maybe not rebuild his confidence, that's maybe not the right way of putting it, but definitely to try and get him more game time under his belt and familiarise him a wee bit more with Scottish football, then it's possibly an interesting one to look out for Sunday. But generally, no, I agree with everything you've said there. Ryan Jack maybe getting the rest, maybe giving Arfield a wee bit of a breather as well is kind of a couple of things I'll be looking at. So there's a couple of options there for rotation. And we've got the squad that's big enough to do that now, and I wouldn't be too worried about it at all. And it's a game that, even if we do make a couple of changes, we should be winning comfortably anyway. So curious to see the road that he goes down with it.
And I think regardless of the team, David, the setup that we've seen against Hearts and Hibs in terms of how we press and how we get at teams early doors, particularly the Hearts game, is something that I think is non-negotiable for these home games now.
Correct. Both of those games, I thought the opposition was surprised by the level of commitment and energy and pressing. We didn't let them settle. And if Rangers don't let a team settle at Ibrox, then we will beat them because we've got more quality. It's when we stand off or we relax. We've dropped points from winning positions at home this season because we were lax, because we thought the game was won when it wasn't. So, yeah, I'm confident we should win this game. It would be a disaster if we didn't. Confidence is high. Understandably, I would expect the team to go out. I would expect the guys to come in to be absolutely busting a gut to say, look, don't you forget about me. I'm here and I'm ready and I'm able to come in. And like I say, you know, St Johnstone away, giving our away form as bad a season as St Johnstone are having, should be the bigger game, should be the one that we should be able to make 3 or 4 changes. I'm not expecting 8 or 9 changes, but we should be able to make 3 or 4 changes, freshen the side up. We've got 5 subs. I would expect us to get this job done. I think that, as I say, home form hasn't been an issue for me, Adam. I'm not panicking about Sunday. I'll probably be a bit more nervous about Wednesday.
Yes. It's a big week coming up, especially as we've got St Johnstone and then Aberdeen on Saturday. So it's a huge week coming up. And we will be back next week to see how we've got on to those games and preview the Aberdeen game. But that'll do us for this evening. Ross, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, pleasure was all mine, mate. Thank you.
And David's a really special night last night. I think it's important to take stock of that. But as we've just said, it's onwards to the next game.
Absolutely. A guy tweeted me last night and said, not bothered about tonight. After the match, he said, Motherwell's a much bigger game. And I thought, if you can't enjoy this, mate, you're doing this wrong. But I felt sorry for him more than anything else. But now, we can enjoy this. Last night and today, we're fans. But the players need to be, that's done. That's in the past. You can reflect on it at the end of the season, at the end of your careers. It's Motherwell on Sunday, and from tomorrow, I'm going to enjoy it the rest of the day, but from tomorrow, then all roads lead to Govan.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. David will be back next week to review the Motherwell game, and that is all for us. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I hope your team wins.